I was sitting across from the man who had just erased 17 years of my life, and he didn't even look me in the eye. Scott was saying something about reorganization, duplication of functions, and a modern vision for the team. I didn't interrupt. I just watched him click the mouse without looking up, as if he thought the conversation was over. And maybe somewhere inside me, I thought so too. It was over. It had happened. The point was made, although not a single sentence was actually spoken. I think you understand, Alora. It's not about you. It's about the structure, he finally said, as if on cue. His voice was even, not soft or hard, just the voice of a man who is used to voicing decisions made by himself. I was silent. The silence dragged on so long that I could physically feel how much it irritated him. I'm sorry, he finally said, not quite to me, but more to the space. As a weight loss, not as sympathy. I nodded, not because I was sorry, but because I want to go out beautifully. I was 41 when I joined the company. We were still sitting in the room above the electronics store, where the server was roaring louder than we were talking. I remember coming up with the first templates on an old Dell when the power went out during the rain. I remember bringing a kettle for the team at my own expense. I remember staying up late at night to launch the MVP release on time, which later brought the company its first investment. I didn't ask for anything extra. I wasn't visible at presentations. I didn't ask for bonuses for global impact or high-profile speeches at meetings. I just created things that worked, without fail, without pathos, just the way it should be. And that's what probably irritated people like Scott. He came to us a year ago with a presentation about efficiency finger sprints and a PowerPoint with words like culture refactoring. He always had the right smile, the right sneakers, the right self-esteem. He knew how to impress, not work, and that was enough. And then everything went fast. New staff, new presentations, new priorities. Old people are no longer part of the plan. Today, I was given an envelope. They also said that they always appreciated my contribution. No signature, no warmth, no desire to say goodbye like a human being. Just paper, a pass, and an automatic thank you. I left the office and noticed that my corporate email was no longer working. My Slack account was disabled. Access to the internal server was canceled. Everything I had touched for 17 years was gone in a second. I passed several colleagues who pretended not to notice, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know how to react. In such situations, everyone hides their eyes. Some people do it because they are afraid to be around, and someone is afraid of being next. There was a box with my things in the corridor. They didn't even let me pack it myself. I looked inside. A cup with a cracked handle, an old notebook, a flash drive that I hadn't used for a long time. But I knew that it contained the very first version of my code. The one I wrote at night when everyone else had already gone home. And the one that Scott later called our innovative flow optimization strategy. And then I felt something very simple. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to do better. I started working at SensusFlow before we were even called SensusFlow. Back then, it was just a group of people from the contacts I had gathered, a former systems architect, a lawyer I knew, a young designer, and me with a background in warehousing and logistics. The founder, Ted, once said, "We don't need an office, we need smart chaos," and we created it, without estimates, no PR agencies, but with a clear idea, to make a system that works without a supervisor, without shouting, without endless Excel reports. We were not building a startup, we were building a place where the algorithm thought together with the team. The idea was simple, logistics that adapts to the rhythm of real life, and not vice versa. I created the first flowcharts on the backs of coffee packets. We met in the kitchen of a rented apartment. Everyone knew that the main computer named The Rock was mine, and when someone got stuck in work, they would say, "Go to Alora, she's already seen everything." I was not the leader of the team, but I was the core, the thread that holds the fabric together. It doesn't catch your eye, but without it, everything falls apart. What I developed seemed too complicated at the time. 3 data streams, cross-segmentation, adaptation modules. Everyone said, too much. But when we implemented it, it worked. It went like clockwork. The level of losses in the network decreased by 38% in the first quarter. All orders are on time. No complaints. Even suppliers started asking what we were using. I remember when Ted wrote on Slack, "Elora, this is no longer an experiment. This is the standard." I didn't ask for a raise. I was just given a separate tab in Jira, Elora's system, and I worked with it like a violin. Until Scott came along. He came 12 years after the launch. He was the new head of operations. Presentable, loud, with a Forbes vocabulary, efficiency, expanding the horizon, optimizing the value of time. He was not hired to understand the system. He was hired to show that we are now growing. And Scott started to grow. Personally, vertically. First, changes in the folder structure. Then, synchronization mishaps. Then, requests. Elora, please send me the router structure. I want to look at the modules myself. I was not naive. But then I had no idea that everything I had lived with for more than a decade would become something that could be repackaged. It still seems funny to me how he first presented his optimization matrix. At the heart of our new logistics is a flexible distribution module that I didn't even hear him finish. Because I knew these words. They were my words, paraphrased, but they were mine. I remember sitting in the hall, looking at him, and knowing that no one would ask me questions. No one would remember me. And then everything went fast. A new interface, without my name in the developers. Reports were no longer copied to my email. A client request that I had been preparing for 3 weeks suddenly went through a new department. Old colleagues wrote, "Have you seen this?" I answered, "Yes." But I did not bring it out, because I felt that the game was no longer about recognition. It was about survival. And when I started to hear the phrase, "a new system that replaced the old Ellerin structure," I realized, this is the moment when your name becomes an example of the old approach. Interestingly, Scott never thanked me. He didn't even pretend to. He had teams. He had flows. He had an approach. And all I had left was a shadow in the variable name, legacy_config_v1. It didn't hurt. It was empty. The worst thing is not that something was taken away from you. The worst part is when they pretend you never existed. Scott loved the phrase, "There is no mine and yours. There is only ours." When he used it, everyone nodded, because they knew that to object meant to be shadowed. He had no enemies, only incompatible elements. He didn't quarrel, he rewired the processes. The first time I noticed this was by accident. It was a presentation for external investors. I usually did not participate in such meetings, not because of reluctance, just not my thing. But this time, I received a copy of the presentation in the mail from a young analyst who was preparing the materials. She sent me the draft with a note. "Please check if the zones in your section are not mixed up." I opened slide 12. It had my algorithm for distributing cargo handling. It was exactly the same. Even the illustration was from my old presentation. Only, my name was missing. The headline read, "Cargo Distribution System, a new optimization strategy initiated by a department head." That is, by Scott. I read the slide 5 times, not because I didn't believe it, but because for a second I thought I was making something up, that maybe we were all really working together and I was just vulnerable. And then I remembered how 2 years ago I was sitting at home at night, counting download cycles, looking for ways to reduce the average processing time by 14 seconds. 14. They were laughing then. "Why are you even bothering with this? It's not going to change anything. It did. And now it's not even mine." The next day, I turned to Marnie, the analyst who did the final proofreading of the presentations. She looked at me sympathetically. "Elora, I'm just compiling the materials that come from the top level." Was my name in the draft? She looked at the monitor, then at me, and said quietly, "Yes, it was." I thanked her. I didn't ask for it back. I didn't ask for an explanation. I realized that the process had already started. In the middle of the month, I received an invitation to a strategy session. Scott opened it with these words. "We are moving to the principle of complete openness. No closed modules, no private developments. Everything is integrated. Everything is transparent." I was sitting in the second row. He walked past the projector, gestured broadly, confidently. My code was on the slides, my unloading scheme, my blocks. But this time it was in the design of his designer with the Brenner Ops model logo. And the most painful thing is not that everyone was silent. The most painful thing is that most people did not sincerely know that it was mine. New people saw it for the first time. Young colleagues from other departments were rejoicing. They wrote in Slack, "Finally, we have a structured system. Thank you, Scott, for the breakthrough." And I replied with a smiley face. Not because it was funny, but because otherwise it would break me. The most memorable moment happened when an intern in the kitchen said, "Did you know that our new director invented this distribution unit? He's only 35. I just smiled and said, "No way, he's fast." And I went home with the kettle that I had bought myself, just so that old one wouldn't be left in the kitchen. Back then, I didn't have a plan. I was just collecting moments. But one of them was particularly important. At night, I went to the internal server and downloaded my old documentation with dates, versions, comments, and I added one file to it with the name proof_v0_never_send.txt. It wasn't blackmail. It was a memory, so I wouldn't forget that it was real, that I did it, that I still exist. It was Friday, 9:34 in the morning. I was just picking up a cup of coffee when I saw a letter in the mail. Your status in the company has been changed. The sender is system@sensisflow.com. No text, just a PDF. I open it. Termination of the contract. Clause 7.3. Optimization of internal structures. Clause 9.1. Without compensation, except for the final payment for the last period. No thank you or stay in touch, just a full stop. And the signature of HR is not even a person with whom I have spoken personally. I read it again, and again, and again. And then, I caught myself standing with a cup in my hands and thinking, how interesting that the date automatically put in the letter is yesterday. That is, technically, I was fired yesterday. But no one told me. Not a word, not even a glance. I logged into the corporate Slack and logged out just as quickly, because my account was already disabled. In the access tables, it read, Status, Inactive. I sat in silence, in my own body, which had been part of the team a minute ago, and I knew that I would not even be allowed to say goodbye. At 10:12, there was a knock at the door. It was a guard, a new one. I didn't even know his name. He held a box and said, "I was told to give you your personal belongings. Can I leave it here?" I nodded. He put the box on the edge of the table and left without waiting for an answer. In the box were my old cup with a dent in it that I couldn't throw away, a flash drive, a notebook, and a bag of almond cookies I'd brought for Claire from the testing department. They didn't even take the cookies out. They just packed everything up as it was. At some point, I started to laugh. I took the file with the letter, opened it again, and you know what I caught myself doing? I was correcting the grammar in my head. Seriously. I sit there and think, well, you can't say it like that. As part of the shift, it's not legal. And then I realized that was it. I got out of the I belong here mode. When I went to my office, it was already empty. Even the chair was not there. The screen was turned off, and the folders I always put in the right corner were put away. Someone didn't like my neatness, apparently. There was a check on the table. The final payment, $1,973.48. 17 years old. One check, one letter, and a box of cookies. I took the things in silence. On the way out, I was stopped by Joe, our driver who was making deliveries between the hubs. "Alora, are you leaving?" I looked at him. For the first time that day, I looked into someone's normal, living eyes, and I said, "I think I'm leaving." He wanted to say something, but was silent. He just took off his cap and held it to his chest, and that was the most humane thing he did all day. At home, I put the box on the floor. I took the flash drive. I sat down. I put it in, and watched it. Last_modified. 2017-0504_22. 12. My old version of the code. Comments. Test cases. Error log. I knew what I had. And for the first time, I didn't feel empty. When a letter appeared in the mail with the subject line, "Request for clarification regarding IP ownership," I almost laughed. Not out of sarcasm, but out of relief. Did they really think I wouldn't keep anything I had worked on for 5 years? Well, they really didn't know me. I opened my old folder. The name was simple, MySystems_2017. It contained the first diagrams, scans from a notebook, even a photo from the kitchen table where I was drawing the logic of a new algorithm on a paper napkin in a bathrobe with an owl print. It was funny and painful at the same time, because they were laughing at my pedantry, and now this pedantry would become a bane of their lives. Do you remember that funny moment when you are looking for something in your laptop and find yourself? It's like that. I came across a video of me explaining my concept to the team in Zoom while my cat was drinking from my cup. Everyone laughed at the time, but no one listened. Now it's proof. A timestamp, lines, an on-screen demonstration, and my cat is an official witness. I put everything in one zip folder. I named it calmly, IP_evidence_Grace, and I sent it. No threats, no lengthy explanations. I simply stated the facts. An hour later, I received a response. A dry one, formal. But in the middle of the letter was a phrase. "We may need to revise our understanding of the origins of the system." Oh, really? So I called Linda Joyce, a lawyer I'd heard of for a long time, but hadn't contacted until now. "Miss Joyce, this is Joan Grace. I think I have an interesting case for you." Intellectual property? And a little bit of quiet revenge. Although officially, it's just protecting my rights. "I'd like to invite you for coffee, and please bring a flash drive." They breathe through their noses there, but they don't realize that I breathe in through the nostrils of contracts. I nodded alone in an empty room. I knew it wouldn't be easy. They would call me difficult, stubborn, uncooperative. But you know what? I'm not silent anymore, and I'm definitely not convenient anymore. We were sitting with Linda in a cafe with the unpretentious name Grounds for Thought. The irony is obvious, but delicious coffee is a fact. She was looking through files from a flash drive, occasionally raising an eyebrow and writing something down in a notebook. I waited, not in silence, just breathing steadily. Finally, she looked up. "This is serious, and this is yours. But I have to warn you, if we go officially, they will try to pay us off. They've already tried, and you know what's interesting? They offered me a job as a consultant, after they fired me, for a lower rate and without any credit." She grimaced as if she had bitten a lemon. Classic. Keep your head down, work harder, and then thank them for not forgetting you. But there is one thing. I was invited to a panel discussion in San Francisco as an independent expert, and if I get on stage and tell them how I created this system without naming the company, they will still recognize themselves. "Joan," she smiled, "it would be an echo." They wanted silence, and you will bring the echo. And more than that. I returned home with the feeling that something had fallen into place for the first time. The old kitchen, the familiar smell of cinnamon from the scented candle, the laptop on the table, but there was a different light, a different me. I opened the document and began to compose a speech. I was not writing revenge. I was writing a story, without names, no companies, only the path, from the evenings with lighted eyes to the moment when the management cut me out of their own project. I was jokingly called the built-in interface. The next day, I got a call from Hank, a former colleague. He was always one of the guys on the board, but he never interfered. "Joe, wait. You're speaking in San Francisco? You're really going public? Why, Hank? Does this affect your career in any way?" I'm asking. Between you and me, you're not going to say anything that's going to embarrass the company, are you? I laughed. They've already put themselves in that position. I'll just light the lamp. After the conversation, I realized that they were nervous. This is the first crack, and I just started knocking. The day of the performance began somehow strangely quiet. You know those days when even the city air seems to freeze? When instead of bustle, there is a focus. I woke up early. Not because I couldn't sleep. I finally had a good night's sleep. I got ready quickly. Instead of the usual gray suit, I put on a blue blouse, high-waisted pants, and a silver ring I've worn since university. A small amulet, my presence. The room at the Marriott Marquis is large, with a high ceiling, TED-style lighting, and a crowd of slightly overconfident techies. There are startup representatives, department heads, and CEOs on the stage next to me. I am the only one without a current title. Just Joan Edel, systems designer and process strategist. But this is exactly what freedom is all about. The moderator started the discussion with standard questions about innovation. I listened without interfering until it was my turn. Miss Edel, you've had a long career in the industry. What would you say is your most valuable project? I smiled. I don't have slides or abstracts in my head, but one night in November when I wrote the first version of FluxLoop. I don't know why, but that moment when it was dark and cold around me and my head was on fire was my answer. The most valuable thing is not the product itself, but the moment when you realize that you have created something that works, that no one can take it away from you, even if they try to erase your name from the report. Silence. Glances. Someone is wary. The moderator leans in. Are you alluding to a specific situation? I'm not hinting at anything. I'm just stating a fact. If innovation in a team comes from people, you can't change them like a battery. Sometimes the best thing you can do is to give them space, not to steal their work and call it shared. This was the moment when the room came alive. Someone applauded. Someone looked at their phone. A minute later, I saw the first posts on Twitter. Joan Edel just dropped the mic. #resilience panel. After the speech, a young man in a light jacket came up to me. You just said what many people are afraid to say out loud. I just answered. I have been quiet for too long. In the evening, I received a letter. It was from the CEO. There was no subject line. It just said, "We need to discuss the situation. I suggest a call tomorrow." No greeting, no signature, naked control. I closed my laptop, for the first time in a long time without fear. The next morning, the email already had a subject line. Authorship question, call at 10:30. It was a serious question, but what struck me the most was that the email was copied to 3 other people I hadn't seen since I was fired: the HR director, the new tech lead, and most importantly, Stephanie herself. She was the one who first started the rumor that I was emotionally unstable. It was a sign. They united, but not from a position of strength, but of fear, and it made me feel almost calm. At 10:27, I turned on the camera. In the background are my real certificates, my whiteboard with architectural sketches, and Milo the cat, who defiantly sat down in the frame. The psychological background is soft but clear. I am not disappearing. I am here. I am in control of the situation. They took turns appearing, a little late. Stephanie's eyes are tired. Her lips are pressed into a thin line. She was the first to speak. Joan, we've been going over some of the materials, and there's a risk that what you said yesterday could be interpreted as... As what? I didn't smile. I was just asking. As an insult to the company. You used the term theft. I leaned closer. A pause, and then very calmly. You're not planning to sue, are you? Because in that case, we'll all have to look at screenshots of Git commits, the history of documentation changes, and metadata from the archive last_modified 2017_11_0 2_041_41_46_g.json in court. I think it will be an interesting conversation. Silence. The sound of someone forgetting to turn off the microphone and gasping for air. Then the new tech lead, a guy named Derek, spoke up. Look, Joan, maybe we can settle this informally. A public dispute is not good for anyone right now. I looked directly into the camera. You're not in a position to discuss beneficial. Yesterday, you were the topic of the day in the industry chat Loop Leaders. And I was invited to present my methodology at the European Systems Forum next month. Everyone was silent. But the most interesting thing happened after the call. An hour later, I got a call from Ava, a former colleague from the finance department. She was whispering into the phone. Didn't you hear? Stephanie's been investigated. Yesterday's performance was the trigger. They say you've had an internal complaint since 2019. Now it has been raised. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at Milo, who was sitting at his laptop again, as if he knew. And what do they say now? that you're back, but not as a subordinate. In the evening, my partner from Larkin Plus Glass wrote to me, a small but influential analytical company. His message was brief. Are you ready to cooperate with us? Full freedom, full publicity, under your name. This time, it was not another name, not a ghostly participation, not a ghost in the corner of the presentation. For the first time, it was me. The invitation from Larkin Plus Glass was not just a pleasant one, it was a game changer. It was an open challenge. They are known for never working with dubious figures. And here I am, an open partnership, a public partnership. I said yes before I even finished my tea. The next day, a post appeared in the Slack community. Larkin Plus Glass is partnering with Joan Ellington on a new study of distributed solutions. First release in 3 weeks. Now, imagine what happens in the office that called you unstable. An hour after the publication, I got a call from Stephanie. I didn't pick up the phone. She wrote, "We want to solve everything peacefully. Can we agree on a statement?" I answered evenly, "You have already written it, in the form of my dismissal. Now it's my turn." A day later, the company posted a press release. It was dry, cold, but it had a sentence. The solutions based on the system first introduced in 2017 continue to be refined within the current teams. I read this and almost laughed. For the first time, a system first introduced in 2017. And then I received a message from a journalist from Tech Now Weekly. "Joan, we are preparing a story about new ethical standards in analytics. Can we include your story, with details?" I agreed. The only condition was that it be published with dates, files, and context. The story was published on Sunday morning. The title, Invisible Authors, the story of a system that the company wanted to rewrite without words. It contains all the main steps I recorded, screenshots, code fragments, and correspondence. That same evening, my phone rang. It was Hugh, an old friend who worked in the company's legal department back in my day. "They're panicking," he said. "The legal department wasn't prepared for you to release the data, and even worse, that everything is so verifiable. Have they tried to respond? They are still preparing an official position, but listen, they're having a meeting right now. They were told that you will be a guest at Ethics and Architecture tomorrow. Is it true?" I smiled. "No, not as a guest. I'm moderating a panel. And I already know the first question I'll start with. When does intellectual labor become visible? And what do we lose when it is not?" I walked onto the stage of the Grand Elysium Conference Hall with the same confidence I had when I entered the project team's office a year ago. But this time, I wasn't holding a tablet with someone else's tasks. It was mine, my name, my experience, my word. 2 former competitors, 1 MIT professor, and I sat on the panel. And when my moment came, I didn't start with numbers. I started with what they didn't have. Have you ever seen the person who created the solution architecture disappear from the project page because it doesn't match the brand's vision? Silence. Then a light laugh. But not mocking, bitterly solidarity. Everyone in the room saw it. Some of them saw it themselves. Some of them saw it in their teams. I didn't mention any names. But those who needed to had already read the article. They knew what it was about. I spoke not about myself, but about a system in which the invisibility of intelligence has become the norm. And I ended with this. I don't want to return the lost place. I created another one. And now that it has taken shape, I invite those who have also been written off to join me, but have not yet written themselves off. On the way out, Adeline came up to me. She used to work in HR at our company. "Joan, it was powerful. And if you're looking for a team, I'm with you." The next morning, I woke up to a call. It was Stuart, an analyst from a company that had recently won a government tender. "We saw your panel. We have a request from the Department of Transportation, and we need a system. Do you already have one?" "I have the basis. The question is in the team. You can assemble a team if you want. We can discuss the contract today." And that's when, in the sunshine, coffee with orange peel, and the first warm morning in a month, I realized that's it. My new project is not just a protest. It's an alternative, not a response to their game. It was mine. A week later, I received a letter from a law firm representing my former company. Formally, it was clarification of intellectual property rights. Informally, it was an attempt to push again. I replied succinctly, "All the key elements of the architecture were registered by me personally before I left. The details are confirmed by the dates of creation, files, and copies of the repositories. Thank you for your concern." There was no response, and there would not be, because they knew that I didn't just have the truth. I proved it, and I left it in the code. My new team is a mixture of old and new. Some are people who left the company after I left. Some are colleagues from the panel. One is even my former student, who was once not hired for an internship because he did not fit the corporate culture. Our first project is for the municipality. It was real traffic forecasting, not just a nice dashboard. We worked at night, not because someone demanded it, but because it was ours. And now it's launch day. The name of my startup is in the press release. Aegis Systems. The name is symbolic. Aegis means protection. It means that we are not just building a system, we are building an ecosystem in which the creator is not a consumable. I left them an office, a corporate laptop, and even a mug with the inscription, "It's never too late to automate." But I took the most important thing, my idea, my reputation, my silence, which they took for weakness, but it turned out to be armor.